Welcome to the Grab Another Gear Sessions podcast. I'm Wayne Williams. Following the .com bust in 9/11 for me, I did what every person that's been in the fly fishing sport would do. I went out and bought a fly shop. That's where I had an opportunity to meet my guest today, Shaun Visintainer with Silverbow Fly Shop in Spokane, Washington. And I'm hopeful that this will be an encouragement to you as you're leading through difficult times. So welcome to the Grab Another Gear Sessions podcast. I'm Wayne Williams, and I'm excited to be here with you in this episode. Following the .com bust in 9/11 for me back in that 01-02 period, where I've documented my CEO diary through the trials and the archives. If you get a chance to read through or listen to those 5 episodes, it would be great. But you take an Enneagram 7 like myself and someone that likes to create and develop product, and during that time there was nothing in telecom that we could actually do to generate any revenue at all. So I did what every person that's been in the fly fishing sport would do. I went out and bought a fly shop. My wife was, I think, a little bit, thought I was a little crazy. I thought, well, what a great opportunity to have my kids understand what it was like to understand cash flow, deal with customers, and then also be in a sport that it goes clear back to my youth that I had been into. And I was excited about going into this new creative space. And that's where I had an opportunity to meet my guest today. This is the first guest in the Grab Another Gear Sessions podcast. And that's Shaun Visintainer. And so, Shaun, welcome. It's good to have you.
Thanks for having me, Wayne. Appreciate it.
You bet. Well, thank you. Thank you for being with us. And the reason that I wanted to bring Shaun on today is he and I both had an opportunity to meet each other at a time. It was a difficult time. I was going through and experiencing this area of economic recession and depression in the telecom market. And our paths crossed during this time when I was starting the fly shop. And Shaun, I just wanted to ask today, maybe as you can share, I mean, it's been almost, that was 2002, so it's almost 18 years, I think, this August.
Yeah,
and
it is.
I wanted to kind of ask a little bit about, maybe you could just share a little bit about how your and my path kind of came about.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it was, unfortunately, it was a tragic event. A friend of mine from high school was in a boating accident, and he was a fishing buddy of mine, good close friend, and he was in a boating accident with his grandfather and 2 cousins, and they all passed away. And it was through his family that I was introduced to your family, mm-hmm. and we connected with the fishing aspect. And it was shortly after that connection that you had purchased the fly shop, and then it's evolved from there.
Yeah, well, it is, and it's a sad time, and I think if I remember right, you and James back in the day always kind of had dreamed about having a fly fishing shop or a fishing shop at some point in your life. Is that correct?
Yeah, when you're young, you truly don't know what you want to do, but I was really into fly fishing, had been in it for a long time, lived it, breathed it as much as I could. And owning a fly shop was certainly high on that list of dream careers. And, the opportunity didn't necessarily present itself at first, but the opportunity to work in the shop with you and for you had presented itself through that tragic event. And, as I continued to work for you and take on more and more roles, that's what ultimately led to the purchase of the shop.
Yeah. Well, and it was great. I just want to tell listeners here, Shaun, it was a great opportunity early on for me to have Shaun working there. He had a great, strong work ethic, and your ability to learn, I think, was huge. I remember there's probably a couple of stories you could probably pull out of some of the sales aspects of that were in there, and then also maybe you want to share a few of those. And then also, I think there was at one point in time where we had a competing fly shop in the market, and you had to make some tough calls to the reps a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, it certainly had some valuable lessons in sales that I learned back in the day. Still learning 18 years later, but yeah, we you had pointed out a few things about entry level doesn't mean entry level pocketbook. That was one that stuck with me for a very long time. And kind of starting high, working your way down the list, trying to find what kind of category they're going to fit in, but then always kind of setting the stage for future purchases. So yeah, there was definitely some valuable lessons that have always stuck with me, and I try to convey those messages to the crew that we got now.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that was great, because I was still running Telect pretty significantly at the time, and I think that my wife at one point thought that Silver Bow Fly Shop was my mistress, because I'd come in the morning at 5:30 and then go to Telect and then be there at lunch and that. But you're on it from a day-to-day standpoint. You ran it well, and I know that I had to kind of, I turned over those reins to you early on, which I think that by the time we ended up in 2005 selling and making a transaction to you, you'd really learned the business pretty well.
Yeah, I think, because your role at Telect was changing rapidly, your ability to get into the shop and do a lot of the day-to-day operations, it just wasn't feasible. So, for me, it was kind of a learn on the fly, no pun intended kind of deal, and just kind of dug in wherever I needed to, and fumbled my way through whatever, and you give me some pointers here and there, and then when the actual transaction happened, the opportunity to buy the shop, it was I was kind of set. You had set the stage already to hand it off and just kind of let me do my things. I essentially, for at least a couple of those 2 out of the 3 years, I was already kind of doing my own thing inside the shop, and you giving me the ability or the trust to allow me to do that, I think was a big learning lesson for me to, and take that and apply it to owning my own business.
Yeah. Well, and I think you've done a remarkable job. I think for our listeners today, I part of the reason that I wanted to bring Shaun in is he's in the retail sector. The fly fishing industry is a small portion of an industry that is out there that's probably, I think, in the mind of many of us at Fly Fish, it might be the best social distancing sport that's out there. Whether it's wading in the river, maybe if you're in a 6-foot drift boat, which I don't think there's too many of those, but that might be a little difficult.
The joke I think on fly fishing social media is fly fishermen have been social distancing since the beginning of fly fishing. So
that's right.
They're experts at it.
So there's a few lessons. There's a few lessons, I think, as we're going to talk through in this next section, that I think is going to be really important. And Shaun, I'll probably share a little bit on my perspective on what I want maybe some listeners that aren't just the fly fishermen to hear. I just going to go back, and there was a real trust factor that I had with you, because you had demonstrated the capability to have a market and understand a market and be able to sell and also do cash management during that time. And there's a trust factor anytime that somebody sells a business and it's not for cash. At that, it's also on a note. And I think that Shaun and I, we entered into that, and starting in 2005. And through Shaun now had this, he now has a lease. He's a tenant inside of a facility, in a retail facility. So there's an obligation there. And then secondly, he's got an obligation to fill and pay for this acquisition of a business that he acquired. And then besides that, he's got his cost of goods, the materials that are coming in. He's having to deal with that side of the industry. And then he's got a group of employees. And so as he started into that, he had to go through in setting this business up and begin to manage in all the different aspects of it. And this all happened in that 2005 period of time. And so I think, Shaun, maybe you can kind of give a little bit of the landscape after this acquisition that you acquired the shop. What maybe your first few years maybe taking us up to that time of the 07, 08, I guess, what we call the Great Recession because of the real estate crash.
Yeah. When I first bought it, it was I was the main kind of guy behind the counter doing a lot of the different roles. And we had a couple part-time folks. We had an accountant that worked part-time and then a couple other guys that were employed, but it was very, very minimal. They might cover a day here or there, half a day or just a few hours even, but that went on for quite a while. And, as I continued to try to grow and evolve the Silverbow brand, I was able to give those guys more hours and maybe change their roles a little bit. And, I could start taking off a few of the hats that I was wearing. But one of the other things that we had to add was a guide service. We didn't have a guide service, and no one in the area. Well, I shouldn't say no one. There was a couple guide services, but I didn't feel like anyone had a true guide service where we took people out on all the different bodies of water around here and really marketed it. So not only was it building the retail side of things, it was trying to create a guide service, a sustainable guide service. And so I think that aspect came in about 08, maybe 07, 08, right in there. And we were working with different outfitters across the Idaho and Montana border to operate under their licenses. Those licenses or permits are very hard to get, virtually impossible at times. So we started, or not we, I started to take on some of the guiding roles, which then allowed more opportunity for other guys to start working in the shop, and we'd kind of overlap. And then I got, some of them got licensed, and I was guiding you and a few other Telec guys. And I think we might've had a couple boats out that day on the Clark Fork. And that was literally the day that the stock market crashed, because back then it was blackberries, and you guys were looking at your blackberries at the beginning of the float. And
I didn't have a BlackBerry, I think then. I hope maybe I did, but it might have been another phone.
I don't know.
Anyway, no, you're right.
Well, maybe it was an iPhone then. Yeah,
I can't remember
stages of iPhone. I don't know. But yeah, it was I remember that fairly distinctly in that float, that you guys said, "Oh, this is not good," and I'm sure there were some other comments made, and it was instantly the world changed. My world changed, your world changed, and so then we get into the Great Recession, and we had to definitely change how we operated. It really just kind of I had to take a step back and put on numerous hats that I used to wear that I was starting to let go. Whether it was standing behind the counter more, or handling classes, or shipping, receiving kind of things, and just really had to really consolidate. And we still had employees, and we were able to keep them on, but a little bit at a lesser degree. They couldn't work as much as they were, and they also had to maybe look for other sources of income as well, to make ends meet. But it certainly it was doable. We just had to really watch what we were purchasing. And a big thing with that, and you and I've talked about it, is having to work with vendors, and the landlord on the lease. Yeah,
that's good. So, those are good, really good points. I think that at some point in time, I remember that it was following that, and when Trina and I ran into you, we were down at the Steelhead Bar and Grill downtown, and I think it was about October, and you came up to me and said, "Hey, I'm going to get your check out." And I said, "Hey, don't worry about it. Put it back in the account." And I think this is a message that I'm really wanting to send now a little bit to people that end up having our debt holders going through an experience right now that that are going through, and they've sold something, or they're following a practice, that it's a time that you're really looking at during critical crisis on what are you going to do. Because I think you were still doing fairly well during that time, but you also had there was a competitive landscape with Cabela's moving in, and Sportsman's Warehouse, I think, was going out of business during that time, and a couple other fly shops. And so now you're encountering this whole idea that you're going to watch people discounting and going out and taking what you've kind of built to and starting to impact financially. And I remember one of the clear messages for me was that a live Shaun Visintainer and Silverbow Fly Shop is worth more than somebody that's a dead Shaun Visintainer and Silverbow Fly Shop in economic terms, because we still had a ways to go at that point on the note. So maybe migrate a little bit about what you kind of had to hunker down a little bit more shortly after that. I think that's when you and Mike really got a little bit tighter on weathering through the storm.
Yeah. At that point, my brother had came on board to help run the business and accounting and IT and technical stuff. So it was really, he was pretty integral in helping me get through that time. But the market was getting more competitive in the sense that, there was discounting and business was just a lot more cutthroat at that time. And we had a lot of competition here in town. And, some of them went to the wayside. So what would happen is their inventory would get liquidated out into our market, which would put a sting, on our sales for a while. We could feel it, and luckily we had a little kind of thing from the fashion industry that hit us with some feathers girls women were putting in their hair, and I just happened to be able to source some feathers. It was just kind of a funny great moment of time. For 6 months we're selling feathers, and the markup was high, but it really helped us weather that storm and get us past a big hump of the recession.
Well, I think you bring up a couple of really key points there. And as you guys have heard so far, one of the things that Shaun, it's easy to acquire, and then it's easy to kind of grow in a market that's growing. But when you go through a really tough, difficult crisis like he saw during that time, he'd opened up a guide service. I think really Silverbow kind of set the Spokane River back on the roadmap with the native red band rainbow that's in this area, and then getting the guide services there, and then really showing also that you've really got to buckle down during a time like this, and you get yourself and hold on to your core. And what you and Mike did was tremendous. I think that additionally, through this, Shaun's brought up a couple of key points. One is the communication, and we'll touch on that in future sessions as well, how important communication is. But the worst thing to do during a time like this is really isolate and then not communicate to whether it's your landlords or your vendors and that, because the comment I gave to Shaun wasn't just for me, it was for everybody. I mean, everybody wants to find the companies that they're used to buying through and acquiring are the companies that we want to see survive during this time. And so I think it's admirable to what you were able to do. Silverbow was able to grow under Shaun's leadership from the time that we sold the fly shot to him to, I would say, 6 to 7 times, possibly even bigger at the high point, with just Shaun's great leadership in that. So with that, we did also the note restructure. We didn't just do that on a flat month-to-month thing. We also looked at seasonality, because the fly fishing industry, as everybody knows, is a seasonal industry, and so there's opportunities to provide flexibility. So the listeners out there, if you're going through that, is really sitting down, communicating both ways in working with your customers, I think is important. And I remember the day that you said you wanted to come, and you ended up paying that note off early and took you and Jen took Tarina and I to dinner, and that was emotional. I think it was emotional for me, and I think for you, but it was such an accomplishment of what you were able to achieve, and the scars that you developed, I think, got to that place right now. So I'm going to go ahead and we'll kind of fast forward a bit, because and if you want to add any color to any of the stuff that I've talked about, I please feel free to do that. But we're gonna kind of take us up to this point today, and with that, on kind of what because you're encountering something that is has really never been encountered by everybody. I mean, you were a microcosm in this small market. So with that, we're going to go ahead and cover that next.
So for the past decade, really, since the recession, we've seen a lot of solid, steady growth. And so we've began to expand and add employees and new positions, and our business has really started to take off. But as everyone knows right now, we have a new difficult situation right in front of us that hit us out of nowhere. I mean, I don't think anyone truly saw this coming quite to this extent. The world is practically shut down at this point. And so this totally brings me right back to the recession time frame of 08, 09, and even 10. And I now have to think about, okay, how are we going to survive this? How are employees going to survive this? Because now I have guys that are full-time all the time. I have a lot bigger staff, a lot more inventory, a lot more vendors. It's all, the whole program is just a lot larger scale. But, thinking back to the time, the last recession, we got to figure out where we can tighten up, immediately, just to stop any sort of financial bleeding and really bring that communication back. I've already been on the phone with a vendor today and explaining the situation. They totally understand it.
That's
that communication is going to be critical over the next few months. I don't think it's going to be a few weeks. I think it's going to be a few months, if not the whole entire year. So the last recession, I think it took a little bit. It was a little more spread out in the beginning, and it wasn't quite so immediate, and it was felt for a lot longer. This one hit us instantly, so we had to make drastic cuts and measures as fast as the world was changing, and things were happening, day to day, or changes were happening day to day. So we had to make changes day to day, hour to hour almost. And so, it's just the lessons I learned from 08, 09 are exactly what we're applying right now, this very day.
Yeah, well, I think it's pretty interesting. I know that you and I and a few others here in town were planning to go to the Seychelles for giant trevally on a fishing trip, and that got kind of shut down. And then you had a couple other trips that you guys had booked, because you're not just into the guiding locally, you're now also a shop that does excursions and that, and you've got quite a clientele that has built up as well. So I think that with all that said, you have a full-time staff now, and you're communicating. What has what's some of the difficulties that you've had, as you've had to shift? Because today, as we're talking, you're by yourself inside the shop. I think that you had a shipping. You had to ship a few things, and you're taking care of that. You don't have customers coming in because, unfortunately, the state of Washington's on a stay order.
We're at a stay-at-home order.
Yeah.
I mean, I am shipping out orders and handling phone and internet business myself.
Good.
Hopefully I can continue that at least, and obviously in a careful, safe fashion. But it's a complete change. I mean, just the other week, business was rolling along. We were getting ready for spring, and then instantaneously a switch was flipped, and I'm back to a one-man band wearing all the hats, virtually. I mean, I got my brother can help with certain computer aspects, and actually, quite honestly, for us, is tough as a time as it is, financially, it's actually going to give us a little bit of an opportunity to do some projects that we really, really need to get done. Which can be done remotely for Mike. But there are projects that needed to happen, and this is actually just kind of puts them right into the spotlight and puts the pressure on us to get them done now while we have that little bit of an opportunity. So, trying to make the positive, trying to turn this into a positive time rather than a negative. Yeah.
What do you think have you had a chance yet? Has it set in to think about how once things do come back on? I think you've got the right mindset to believe things are going to happen, stay a lot longer. But at the same time, we're always hoping that it's going to, turn around a little bit quicker in this environment. So, but have you given it thought at all on looking out ahead, how this might change your business, and could it, could you see ways of capitalizing on that? And I don't mean today, because right now we're really concerned, but you're looking at kind of getting your employees back on, You're looking at making sure that the customers are still staying in tune to you. But has that set in yet with it, or is it just right now you're?
Yeah, well, definitely a lot of things we're just taking things as they come day to day. But yeah, we are. Mike and I have been thinking strategically for the future of, what is this going to do? We obviously would like to bring everybody back in at full capacity, and we have to really think about what that's going to look like. Are any of the roles going to change? What I mean, quite honestly, if our team found jobs elsewhere, that would totally completely change how we operate.
Right.
So, in the not too near distant future, there's probably gonna be a lot of hats that I'm going to continue to wear for a while, even if we go back to some bit of normalcy. And then, I'm trying to be optimistic about, this thing happened quickly. Let's hope it ends quickly, and doesn't get drug out for years and years like the recession kind of did. I mean, not years and years, but it was drawn out for a long time.
Right.
So as quick as this hit, maybe it'll disappear just as quick. But yeah, we're definitely thinking about things that we can implement now, and in the future to alleviate issues. Certainly.
Yeah. Well, I just again want to applaud you. I think that it was a pretty sudden shock, and especially when we're told we have to close our businesses for a period of time, that even makes it more and more difficult, and it kind of forces everybody to stay home. And I know people want to get outside, and they want to, just at the time spring's about ready to start, and we're heading into blue wing olive season, and I know all the good stuff. And I think what the Spokane River right now, it's going to be closed here for a period of time, is it not, as well? Or when's that coming up?
The season on the Spokane actually had just closed, but our nearby neighboring states, Idaho, Montana, their seasons are year round, and they're actually just getting into their prime right now for the pre-runoff fishing. So we're going to feel lots of effects, not just our business, our local business, but business traveling through. That we're going to see. We're not going to see anybody traveling.
Yeah, really. That's right. Yeah. Well, I just want to applaud you too. I mean, I think that the message for our listeners today, I think, it covers a couple areas. One is you got to respond as a business owner. You got to respond as quick as possible to these things with the compassion for your employees, which I know you've done, and I know there's people that have circled around you to give you that support as well. And so we want to thank you for kind of following some pretty good business practices in dealing with that. And we wish to see. I know I wish to see when I get to the fly shop to see the many faces that were there at some time here in the future. Want to also just thank you for your commitment to this area in Spokane, and I think there's some key points over the years. You're a weathered and seasoned, if you will, in this space. And if there's any young people out there that might been starting out and need any input, I know that you're somebody that they could draw on, because I think you remember one time when we were going through this that I said when you're young, you can ask anybody 40 and 50 to help you out, and they'll say, yeah, we'll help you out. Then when you get older, you're going to be one of those people that's been weathered that people are going to want to ask, hey, can you help me out? And so I would just encourage people, if you get a chance, to shoot an email to Silverbow Fly Shop, and just if it's any area where you're struggling, or as well as me at Grab Another Gear. And just want to thank you for your time, Shaun. And I want to also let everybody, the listeners, know that fly fishing's a great and wonderful sport. There is a lot that can take place right now. It's a good time maybe to teach your kids in the backyard if you've got a fly rod in Silverbow. While Shaun is a one-man show right now out there, he still's creating shipping labels and shipping product out. So this is, and I get nothing from this. My biggest message, is I think is, stay the course with the relationships. And Shaun and I've had a strong relationship for a long period of time, and he's somebody I really wanted to bring on in this first capacity, because I feel like he's been a real it's been a real honor to have him as a friend, and then also watch him walk through some tough stuff. And he just represents a small microcosm of many other businesses out there in the restaurant business today, and retail and manufacturing, and that are going through some real difficult times. And hopefully today this message to the listeners is one that can be one of encouragement. And you've heard some insights from Shaun in walking through that, and we just want to thank you. Shaun, any final comments you'd like to make?
You've obviously covered a lot of them, but I talk to a lot of other business owners and guys in business, and really it doesn't matter whether you're a small shop like mine that just has a handful of employees, or 500 or 5,000. Mm-hmm. It's all about your relationships and human management, and dealing with each other in a respectable and professional way, and keeping those communication lines open. And no matter how big you are, we're all essentially, it's all the same.
Yes, it is.
That's what it is.
Well, thank you for that too.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Well, you bet. I appreciate it, and we'll maybe look forward to doing one of our next podcasts on the water, where we can be a few feet apart in the drift boat or waiting. So
fly rod length apart.
There you go. That's right. That's well, thank distance. You. This is Wayne Williams with Grab Another Gear Sessions, and my guest today was Shaun Visintainer with Silverbow Fly Shop in Spokane, Washington. And I'm hopeful that this time that you're able to spend listening to this podcast has been valuable, and really want to be an encouragement to you as you're leading through difficult times. Thank you, and enjoy your day. Thank you for listening to the Grab Another Gear Sessions. Join me next session for more stories and experiences that may help you overcome your next challenge.